There we go. Because you were reading about goals and planning today. Let me just offer you these distinctions. We've talked, much of this will be reviewed because we've anticipated a lot of this. Do you remember the difference between operative and official goals? Official goals are the formal statements many times about what organizations say they're about. They tend not to change weekly or monthly. They tend to be more enduring. Frankly, the official goals of organizations tend to be more enduring than I think your text suggests. Your authors say something about goals are not written in stone or shouldn't be. Well, in fact, official goals frequently are written pretty much in stone. They tend to be long-term statements that have a long lifespan. But frankly, that's a lot of window dressing, because what the organization is really about at any given time will be known by its operative goals. And it's much more difficult to identify what those operative goals are because they might not be written down, or they might not be written down at places where you can conveniently access them. Operative goals are the ways, the structures frequently that change as the environment changes and as a dynamic, complex organization has to adapt to that environment. The operative goals many times are the first things that give expression to that. So if one funding source ends, you look around for another funding source. Your goals of high quality service to clients have remained unchanged. But your operative goal now is let's get some money so we can continue to exist and provide high quality of services for people. And we will focus on the operative goals for a period of time. We can also distinguish among goals on the basis of of the language and how they orient various publics to the nature of the organization. So here we're distinguishing between preamble, policy, and program goals. Preamble goals are the great big American flag, apple pie, mom kind of statements about an organization. Policy goals would be stated at a more specific level of concreteness, but still defy careful measurement. They would still be largely political in nature. A program goal becomes much more specific. A program goal probably addresses in a more specific way one particular set of values or one particular set of tasks before the organization. And below the program goal, probably the objectives. What does your author say about objectives as they relate to goals? More specific concepts. That's exactly right. Measurable, specific, time and time specific. Now we've talked about the difference of and for goals, right? The goals of an organization, the goals for the organization, as it relates to what that we've talked about today. Groups, that's exactly right, groups. And so when we talked about the ways groups could relate to one another, remember in the struggle for dominance within the organization, we see most of those kind of things. We see probably some groups trying to avoid, some groups in conflict and competing with one another, some groups coalescing with one another so that they can become ascendant. And when a coalition is formed and becomes ascendant within an organization, it by definition acquires the power to convert its goals of the organization into the goals for the organization. So again, here we're distinguishing between these. Now, just time out. Why are we talking about this right now? Goals, all these different things of goals. Your author spends so much of this particular chapter talking about goals and talking about how goals relate to planning, and yet we're now beginning to differentiate all different kinds and meanings and shades of goals. So what are the particular meanings of goals that your author has embedded in in this particular chapter? Because they only address some of these. That's the point I'm trying to make here. It's a more complex kind of thing, and if you want to go back and take a look at some of those things, begin to change some of these meanings of goals from operative to official or vice versa, from preamble to a program goal. And now the dynamic and the kind of the politics of organizational leadership becomes more pronounced. It becomes less technical, because planning, no matter how technical it will be, will always involve high levels of politics and of guessing, if you will. Thompson and McEwen, as I mentioned before, looked at goals as a relationship with the environment. Not just something that was internal, but that might even be imposed largely by an environment on an organization. Now, your authors do talk about goal displacement. Another term for that is goal drift. Right? And they distinguish that between goal succession and goal abandonment. Very important kind of distinctions there. Right. The key here is that goal succession and goal abandonment, goal succession particularly planful, goal abandonment generally planful, goal drift not planful at all. They distinguish between goals and objectives, as we do here. Objectives, specific, measurable, time limited. You can measure whether or not, or the extent to which you achieve objectives. It's a direct measurement of objectives so that you can indirectly determine the extent to which you've achieved goals. Got that? We measure goal achievement indirectly by measuring objectives directly. Now, planning can be thought of in a variety of ways, as a technical versus a political event or experience or process, as exclusive versus inclusive. By the way, if it's a technical event, it tends to be exclusive. The planner, who's a problem solver, computer wizard, statistical analyst, who then creates a plan and gives to somebody else, probably with a budget. If it's political, overtly political, if you will, it tends to be more inclusive, involving constituencies, more open. It can be top-down, or it can be bottom-up. In my experience, no matter what it's called, it's almost always top-down. There may be some features of a bottom-up approach. Tends to be top-down. Where's management? More toward the top. Where's the power? Toward the top. Do people who have power willingly give power away? No, and they're not going to do that in the planning process either. It can be focused or it can be strategic. Strategic is big screen planning. Looking at the environment, looking at what it offers, looking at what it threatens, looking at the organization in terms of what it could be, not just what it is, and trying to find opportunities to match the realities of those kind of things. And budgeting is planning. What is it? Who pays the piper calls the tune? If you've got control of the purse strings, you've got control of the effective planning apparatus of an organization. One of the things that's happened since the 1960s was when this PPBS, Program Planning and Budgeting System, was introduced into the federal government by Secretary of Defense at the time, under Kennedy administration. Cost effectiveness and cost benefit analyses were the key technologies of program planning and budgeting system. That's what's been left to us. So later on, when we get into program evaluation, we'll be talking about cost benefit. We'll be talking about cost effectiveness analysis. And I will tell you right now, the Reagan administration, as a result of a presidential directive, required all federal agencies to use cost benefit analyses. Now, the implication of that was the requirement to convert all outcomes into a monetary value. A monetary value, all outcomes. So in Child Protective Services, you know what you're doing in Child Protective Services? Well, it needs to be measured under cost-benefit analysis as the dollar value of your services to children or to society. So put a dollar value on that kid. That's part of planning.
Keep that kid in the home so the state don't have to pay for foster care.
There you go. That's one way to do it. Or the amount of hospitalized, the value of the hospital services that a battered child might otherwise experience that we can now use as part of a sum that's not available for that. Instead, it's available for economic growth. Okay, so we'll add that $55,000 here. That's the value of our services. Nowhere in cost-benefit analysis will you find a healthy youngster. That's not going to be expressed. Nowhere are you going to find happiness, self-fulfillment, self-actualization, a good life, a family, children in the future. Right? That's all part of planning. That's planning, but it also shows that planning involves a political agenda, always does, always will. You're not going to get away from it. Okay?